This week on This is America and the World, we continue a two-part roundtable discussion devoted to the Caribbean region and the Caribbean community known as Caricom. Our guests include Ambassador Anthony Phillips-Spencer from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Sir Ronald Sanders, Ambassador from Antigua and Barbuda, and Ambassador Daniel Gutierez from Belize.
We have to look at everything, at re-engineer certain systems and how we do business. So let's start by business, and let's talk access to finance. That's a very important part of how we're resilient. We have been purchasing development financing at too high a price. I'll just put it like that. We need access.
What does development financing mean?
Loans, essentially.
Okay.
We are not asking for giveaways. We are purchasing money. We're making loans. What we are saying is, because of the reality of climate change, because we will need to re-engineer how we deal with our future, we will need access to cheaper money to do so. Mm-hmm. That is what we're saying.
So that shows up in the preparedness, the energy grids that were so devastated. Yes. Continue.
Let me follow on. You see, for small island states in particular, there's a reality, to use Dan's reference, called vulnerability. Mm. Yes? When Ambassador Sanders said that Dominica's GDP was 200% destroyed by Hurricane Maria, mm-hmm. The GDP for Dominica in 2016 was 0.53 billion. Just to replace and repair that destruction alone is 1 billion. So in other words, Dominica needs to work for 2 years to fund the destruction of one single hurricane. But guess what? That's just to keep producing the gross domestic product. Dominica and other small countries have also been engaged in a development process. Mm-hmm. To ensure that as we go along, not only can we continue to produce the GDP that we have, but to increase that GDP, mm-hmm. which is already low. When you are faced with massive hurricanes or climate events like Hurricane Maria and Irma and so on, what we need to recognize is that when the United States, Texas, and Florida was struck by those hurricanes, the impact on the GDP was 1%. So in other words, from operating at 100%, about 90, 95% maybe. In the case of Dominica as it exists now, the economy has had to shut down. What happens to the people? What happens to life? What happens to schools? Trinidad and Tobago, our government has accepted Dominicans to come and stay with us for 6 months since they need time and space to simply find a way to return to life. Now, I'm not sure that you find that level of displacement and vulnerability in other countries. And so in the Caribbean community, where we principally all small countries, I mean, the largest territories, including Haiti, is not even our largest territory, Haiti, or country, which accounts for almost 2/3 of the entire population of the community. We still have a development agenda. So I make the point, as we did at the recent World Bank IMF meetings, where the prime ministers of Antigua, Barbuda, and St. Lucia, and other foreign ministers and finance ministers made the point. We need an equivalent to, the Marshall Plan was at the end of the Second World War. Mm-hmm. 16 European countries, devastated by a world war, needed a means to swiftly and sustainably rebuild their economy so that they could quickly get back on the track and keep going. We need that in the region. We don't have the capacity to do it ourselves. We recognize that resilience, which we must build to overcome the vulnerability, is essentially an internal process, and we are prepared and committed to do what we must and will.
Let me ask Ambassador Sanders.
Sure.
Talk about Antigua and Barbuda. Barbuda decimated, devastated. Some of us, say take Puerto Rico. It's territory of the United States. So does the United States, or Houston, or
Yes.
or Florida to lean on. But you laid out no grandfather in your particular case. So I want to know, is there help coming in your direction for the infrastructure, for the rebuilding, for the folks?
Frankly, if I were to measure help in terms of people's promises and pledges, if I were to measure help in terms of promises and pledges,
Yeah.
we'd be wealthy. But those promises and pledges are nothing more than that. So far, all the people, all the countries that have, big countries, rich countries, that one would have expected to be able to respond to this quickly, have pledged and promised but delivered nothing.
Huh?
So we are now, we had the hurricane on the 6th of September. We are now in the 6th or 7th week of having to cope with this matter by ourselves. Now, there was some emergency help from some countries immediately, which helped to deal with the immediate crisis of what do we do with the Barbudans we've evacuated to Antigua. We've not been able to address the problem on Barbuda because it's a $250 million project, which is 20% of the entire economy of Antigua and Barbuda. We simply cannot do it on our own. Now, we are not making any demands that people should help us. We're not even begging people to help us. What we are saying is this: we didn't cause this problem. It was caused by climate change. We didn't create climate change. We contribute to greenhouse gas emissions in the world, we in the Caribbean, less than 0.001% of the greenhouse gas emissions. The big polluters are the big and rich countries. So the big and rich countries...
United States, China, Russia, whatever.
Well, you call the names. I couldn't
yes.
possibly do that, but anyhow.
You're a diplomat, yes.
So the point is, there are rich countries that that have caused the problem, and we are the casualties of that profligacy. And all we are saying is, don't leave us here to suffer for what you have done. Understand there's a difficulty. Help us and let us understand that climate change is not going to go away. It's going to get worse over time. And therefore, what we want to do is to rebuild in a resilient fashion so that we can withstand hurricanes that are Category 5 and greater in the future. And to do that, we need help. If not, year after year, our economies are going to be destroyed, and year after year, we're going to be saying to the international community, we need help. Some may respond, others may not. But this dilemma is not going to go away until we deal with it. And if I may make one small point on this, you have a hurricane in the United States. It affects one part of your country and maybe one part of your economy. Your people are free to move to other parts of the United States, to jobs, and you can look to the federal government, to FEMA and others for help. When we have a hurricane in the Caribbean, it's total. It's everything. It's not just agriculture, not just tourism, not just the Florida Keys or oil. It's everything. Because the hurricanes, when the Hurricane Irma sat over Barbuda, Barbuda is 62 square miles. It's smaller than Washington, D.C. And when Hurricane Irma spread over it, it was 375 miles wide. Barbuda had no chance whatsoever. So we have to understand this is the condition of smallness and the vulnerability to which Anthony speaks.
Sorry.
I got to take a little break. Let the folks at home know that we're having this very important conversation about countries of the Caribbean community. And if you don't know the phraseology now, you should. Caricom, C-A-R-I-C-O-M, meaning and translating to Caribbean community. 15 member countries, 5 associate countries, 8 observer countries, all involved. A population, if I'm close, about 17 million in those countries. A very younger population, as a matter of fact, but important to our area. So we're very pleased to have with us from Belize, Ambassador Gutierrez, from Trinidad and Tobago, good friend, Ambassador Phillips-Spencer. On the far right, Sir, or Ambassador Sanders from Antigua and Barbuda. Take a short break of a few seconds. We'll be back on the other side. This is America and the World.
This is America and the World is brought to you by the Libra Group, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, John and Mary Pappajohn, the American Hellenic Institute, the U.S.-China Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Ambassador Julia Chang Block, President. The National Hellenic Society, preserving Hellenic heritage in America. Katerina Panagopoulos. The Barakis Foundation. The League of Arab States. The Rotendaro Family Trust. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings.
We're having a very important and a very positive conversation. Some heaviness to the subjects we're talking about, but important with Ambassador Gutierrez, Ambassador Phillips-Spencer, Ambassador Sanders. I want to make sure that we get important topics on the table. What comes to your mind, Ambassador Gutierrez, that we should make sure that we get into this conversation?
Well, there are many, Dennis, but
Yes.
Given the lack of time, I think it is imperative that we look at some of the areas that deal with the survival of the region, that which is important to us. There is a perception that the region, the Caribbean, is this area where people go to hide their taxes, where people run away from the IRS or from whatever the tax authorities may be in the OECD countries. I think it is important for us to address this. Again, I will leave this to my colleague, Ambassador Sanders, who's much better prepared than I am to address this. But I think it is imperative that Americans realize that this is really not the case, that the information that's out there needs to be corrected.
And if I may say, this is an impression that even lingers in amongst the members of your Congress. I have been amazed in the conversations we've had with congressmen to discover that many of them do believe that the Caribbean is a money laundering tax haven. That's what they say, it's a tax haven. Now, I'll tell you why that is not true. Every country in the Caribbean has a tax information exchange agreement with the United States of America, which means that if the United States company or an individual has any asset that's taxable in the United States, in that country, automatically, if the United States says we'd like that information, we have the obligation legally to hand it over. More than that, we are all signatories now, or in the process of all of us being signatories, to something called the Foreign Account Tax Act here in the United States, by which we, the authorities in the Caribbean and the banks, have become the policemen for the IRS. We now have to report if an American company or an American businessman or American person has a bank account in our country, we have to tell the IRS. So there is no way, absolutely no way, that we could be regarded as tax havens, because there's no way in which we could be. To do it would be to break our own laws, or forget the laws of the United States, but our banks are also subject to penalties by the United States if they do not report this to the IRS.
Is this different from something that we may hear or something that we may read about shell companies and offshore?
Well, I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
Because guess which is the country that has the biggest shell companies and offshore hidden companies in the world?
Who?
The United States of America.
How so?
Well, I'll tell you. In the United States, you can go to Nevada, you can go to Delaware, and you can open an IBC, an International Business Corporation, with a numbered account, no names necessary. You don't have to prove who owns it. That couldn't possibly happen in any part of the Caribbean, because we are now subject to the requirements of the Financial Action Task Force and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that demand we put those things into law. It is law in our countries that nobody can open an account without the beneficial owner being known, without a shell company being formed. No shell company can be formed. It has to have a physical presence. We have to know who these people are, but we can still do it in the United States. And guess which country is grabbing all of the trust business and shell company business right now?
Who?
United States of America.
Let me say one thing, Ambassador. When you talk about going up and talking with congressmen and them having some perceptions of the area and the country, I don't know if this is true today, but several years ago I remember reading a particular point that most, not senators, but congressmen and women who are elected to Congress, about 50% of them did not have a passport.
I've encountered some who didn't know where Belize was, let alone Antigua and Barbuda.
I'm sure. Right. What items should we get on the table here, Ambassador?
I want to go back to, and again, it's so connected to the economics and the trade relations that we've had enduring partners over the years. After 9/11, when the international ship and port security regime was implemented across the world, one of the regions that was most severely affected was the Caribbean and our tourism industry. And our small territories, governments, invested immensely in making sure that we complied with the ISPS, just to be sure that we could guarantee to visitors from all over the world, but also many who come from the United States, secure places to enjoy your vacation. Yes? Mm-hmm. We offered the services to the United States. Now, over time, we have found that we've had to work hard to remind and convince our biggest partner that we are willing, mature, and able partners in securing the Caribbean Basin. We were very encouraged, I have to say, by the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, and we are also looking forward to how that is going to convert in the future with the U.S. Caribbean Strategic Engagement Act, which was passed in December last year. But let me tell you what the reality is. The Caribbean, and I always go back to the Pirates of the Caribbean story, is one of the places in the world with narrow passages, sea passages, and nowhere else in the world is the investment by the United States in securing its own commercial lanes. The investment in securing those lanes is lowest in the Caribbean. We have been agitating, okay, the region is called the transshipment zone for drugs and all sorts of things. But if you go to Southeast Asia, the Gulf of Aden, and areas like that, the investment and the partnership by the United States with its partners in those regions in terms of implementing persistent surveillance systems and really major investments in security, hardware and apparatus, ships, we got a drop in the bucket in the region. We think it is time, this is the region's time, for that major type of Marshall Plan type perspective and investment in our trade and economics, in helping us to develop what we call now climate resilient development and multidimensional sustainable security. We've been making the point, the rules by which our governments have to borrow. When Trinidad and Tobago had to acquire helicopters or boats or whatever, the prices we paid, the terms on which we borrowed loans to secure our own borders and our own sea space, which is traversed principally by vessels owned by the United States, transporting goods to the United States, we have had, for small economies, to bear too much of that cost. The entire GDP of Caricom in 2016 didn't even reach $75 billion US. I think if you went through the Forbes list of wealthiest people in the world, probably one individual might probably, in terms of his worth, be close to, if not exceeding, the total GDP of 15 countries, 18.1 million people in CARICOM. Now,
I think it's important to point out that that 75 billion figure,
71.59,
71.5 billion that you ascribe to the Caribbean's GDP in comparison with the United States, which will probably make the point even greater, is that the United States' GDP last year was $20 trillion.
We haven't hit 100 billion yet. But we are small, we understand, but in terms of scale and responsibility, we sit closest to the United States. We are the third border, the closest security cooperation partner to the United States. We would look forward to the types of investment in security, in regional security cooperation. And we get lots of training assistance and technical assistance, but there is now the requirement to invest into hardware to secure and sustain the security of the Caribbean basin.
Put that word security, and let's examine that, because I sense a level of frustration. What's that?
Passion, not frustration.
That's a nice way to say it. Thank you, Ambassador. I would expect no less from you than to put it in diplomatically. These countries, which are a very short flight away, are crucial to our security.
That's the point.
Dennis, another way of looking at it is to say that perhaps a generation or so ago, this region, the Caricom region, is a region that sent its young boys and its young men and women off to Europe to fight in the two largest wars of the last century. We did not blink. So in terms of security, we have also made that sacrifice at the altar of freedom. We are not expecting anything great. What we are expecting is a partnership, as my colleague said earlier. What we want is a partnership that recognizes, at the very least, that we are a client of yours. We purchase, we buy more from you than you buy from us. That is what we're saying. Look at us as a partner, look at us as a customer, look at us as a friend who has put its blood where its mouth is. That's what we're saying. And as climate change continues to be something that we all have to worry about, we are going to need the United States' friendship and partnership to lean on who needs to be leaned on to look at lower cost financing. Again, we're not asking for a handout. We are asking to purchase money at lower rates.
Ambassador Sanders, we are coming in the vicinity of 2 or 3 minutes. Something that's been in your mind that you want to make sure we get on the table here.
Well, there are lots of things on my mind, but I think since we are coming to the end of the program, and I think we ought to look at it in a positive, how do we go forward basis.
Nice.
And what I'd like to say is this, to you and to the audience that's looking at this program. Look, we share in the Caribbean a lot of things with the United States of America. The independence of our countries was based on your struggle for freedom. The fact that you say there should be no taxation without representation, the fact that you say you wanted to have the right to self-determination, all of those things inspired us. The United States' belief in its Constitution, in the equality of man, in the inalienable rights of people, all of those things were the things that encouraged us to become independent countries. And it is what built from the very start a symbiotic relationship, an affinity with the United States that the United States does not enjoy with any other part of the world, not even with Europe. Because we, like you, are immigrant peoples who have come to the Caribbean, just as people have come to the United States. We met native people, but that's the mix. We share all sorts of things together. We share an interest in each other's security and well-being. Our people have been coming to the United States to study, to get a higher education, for tourism purposes, and your people have been coming to us for the very same reasons. We have had a great relationship over a long period of time. It's a relationship that the United States is in danger of neglecting to our detriment, but to the detriment of the United States as well. We need to do better than that.
Ambassador, 45 seconds.
We are small islands or territories, but our people, our human resource, most important. And we offer to the United States in our partnership intellectual power. We supplement the intellectual power. Together, we have put our brains together as the United States and the region, and we have produced wonders. The United States has adopted and embraced the steel pan as a musical instrument more than any other country in the world. We would love to see that those people, our people, live in a region that's resilient, not vulnerable, and that its development is realizable.
I want to say to the folks at home, our viewers at home, and each one of you, go to the computer tonight bring up a map of the Caribbean countries. Just take a look and appreciate this wonderful conversation. It's been so enlightening, so educational for all of us. I just thank you all, ambassadors, very, very much. Thank you so much. Thank you all at home. See you soon.
For information about This is America and the World, and to watch all of our programs, visit our website, ThisIsAmerica.net, and look for us on Facebook and Twitter. Special thanks to Republic Bank, Caribbean Airlines, and the group. This is America and the World is brought to you by the Libra Group, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, John and Mary Pappajohn, the American Hellenic Institute, the U.S.-China Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Ambassador Julia Chang Block, President, the National Hellenic Society, preserving Hellenic heritage in America, Katerina Panagopoulos, the Barakis Foundation, the League of Arab States, the Rotendaro Family Trust, and the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings.